Howdy folks! So this is going to be a continuation on the box rock modeling video I had done previously. This is just going to show you what you can do with this rock after the fact that you've done this like basic block out. So if this was for games, I wouldn't really change it that much to be honest because it's already pretty low. Probably what I would do is I would add a triangulate modifier. I'd probably do a few manually, like some of the bigger ones, like for example, maybe just throw this here, for example. Just a couple things, but if you put triangulate on it and you enable this so we can see, and you actually change the surfaces to 5, what that'll do is anywhere where you had a quad, but only a quad, it'll make it 5. Honestly, you could do this and you could just completely triangulate it. Obviously, this is also acceptable for games, but yeah, I wouldn't really need to do much more. It's already basically low enough. Just want to clean it up essentially. The question mark is what would you do with this if you wanted it for animation? Because this obviously is not quite going to hold up. The edges are quite sharp, and you can't subdivide this at the moment because it just collapses, as we can see. So there's two different ways to go about it. Step one is, okay, so in animation, there's two different ways to get a bevel. You can either like model your bevel in, which is obviously preferred for like VFX or games. A lot of the time animation will just reinforce along an edge and allow the subdivision to create a bevel. So depending on how you want to go about it, if you want to take the faster route, the easiest way to get those bevels on this object for animation is to, I'm just going to duplicate this in case I do another example, but select one hard edge, select all by select similar, and then you go sharpness. So that'll allow us to select all those edges at the same time. Bevel weight, turn this to 1, and then you're going to add a bevel modifier. And right away you can see what's happening. By default, it's set to edges and angle. So it's like depending on the angle, will kind of change more or less. And this alone might give you what you need, but you also have the option of making, instead of angle, sorry, amble. Instead of angle, you can go by weight, and this will make it so only the edges you selected will have beveling on them. It just makes it a little bit easier, in my opinion. Another thing I would do as well is instead of one segment, I would just change it to 2. So we can just kind of see that here. And the shape, honestly, you don't really need to play with. It's kind of, for example, if this is your bevel, it's just kind of like what shape is between these 2 points. So whether it sticks out more or it sticks in, it gives you a lot more control in that regard. Just the default 0.5 is totally fine for this setting. The space between the bevels, though, is controlled by the amount setting here. It is popping a little bit. I think by default, clamp overlap is on. So you can see when I turn that off, basically it allows you to set it to whatever the heck you want. That's why it's popping. So if you turn that off, that allows you to kind of like pick a little bit more precisely. It's good to have it on just because then you can't go above. There's like a certain cap. Essentially when the edges would start to collide and stuff like that, that's when it just sort of caps it for you. So that's kind of a good way to do it. But I'll just get this back here to a spot that makes sense. Okay, so say I like this setting. Easiest way to test it is just to turn off your wireframe. Is that the level of sharpness that you want to get for your edges? So if you take off cavity, it's a little bit easier to see. So you just kind of zoom in and you just sort of test how sharp you want it to be before you go too far. So it's like that looks pretty good. 0.005 is working pretty well. Don't need subdivision anymore. At this point, we can start to stabilize it. So what I mean by that is just quad it, essentially. So I like to turn off the bevel modifier when I'm in edit mode. So when you go back to object mode, you can still see it. In edit mode, you can't. And I like to have subdivision on as well, because then when you go into edit mode, turn that off. You can work, go out of it, you can kind of see what's happening. So this will tell you where things are collapsing, for example. Of course, like I was saying in my previous video, if you have areas which are kind of warbling a little bit, if you do the flattening technique, that can really help with that. This type of thing is kind of bound to happen with bevels. There's a few different options you can take. You could add a bevel here, and that basically fixes it, and it adds like this extra little reinforcement in the geometry. Just disable that so it's easier to see. That's technically an option. You could also manually fix it after you bevel it, but I tend to prefer to try and get as far as I possibly can just with this bevel and just see how far I get, going that way. So when you have an edge where there's like two that are kind of equally sticking out of it, like for example, this is kind of collapsing a little bit right here, and I have two equal edges. I'd rather just have one, and I need another edge for here anyway, so let's do this, not that, and draw this across, and then just push this over here, maybe put that there, and then I can take this one, increase the bevel weight, and that fixes that corner. So this is kind of the thing that you're looking for at this point in time, just to try and get all these little details. This back edge here obviously is incomplete, so I'm not really too concerned about what's happening here. I could just delete this as well, since this is just the back of my example. But continuing on, so let's just neutralize these a little bit. This also gives us extra loops for this spot here. Going for like the obvious ones first makes it a little bit easier. You can add, you could do stuff like this, or you know what, maybe adding it this way is a little bit better, a little bit cleaner. And yeah, you just want to see where these spots are like collapsing. If you do just increase one, sometimes it can help, and that's all you really need. I tend to prefer to do this, where you're just like splitting the edge and having them run over either side of what edge you were trying to reinforce, just because that tends to work a little bit nicer, in my opinion. So it's like more of just one loop that's leading from it. I like that better. That's more of a personal choice. It's not that particular. Okay, so we see this twisting here that's happening, this sort of weird effect that's going on. That's probably just because this is a very stressed face. So what I mean by that is you can kind of see how it looks like it's like missing an edge almost that would be going across. You said essentially just need to flatten it. So if I can pull this out more and push that in, that sort of corrects it. You could also just push until you see that artifacting kind of disappear, but that's the kind of thing you want to look for. Here's another spot where it might be good to, well, honestly, this is not even that bad. Could just make sure it's flat. Just kind of test the difference between the two. This one's also kind of a stressed face. I'll take these guys and just flatten it a little bit. And then this face is also stressed. So we'll do this and draw across, grab here, just to get that constant edge. So there's just one running through. And we'll do this, and I'll do something else with this edge. Could probably just run it down that way instead. So it's a little bit better. And then just take this, make sure it's flattened, because we're getting that like crease that I did not want in that detail. So that's kind of helping. And yeah, a little bit of pull isn't bad. This is being very finicky and nitpicky. Like you're probably not even really going to see that in an animation render, because this is also not a very shiny surface or anything like that. Now this one is sort of messy. This one we got here, this one's a little messed up. So I want to flatten this face out a little bit. I don't want to pull this back up again because I just flattened it by fixing this side. So I'm going to pull this side down instead. And we need another edge to like stabilize this one. So I'm going to draw this way. I'm just going to pin it there for now. Doesn't super matter, but just something to give it a little bit more. Probably need to push it even more than that. Haven't fully decided. Get rid of this guy. Run this down here. That quads that up. But yeah, that pulling is definitely just like a lack of stability in the area. So as I'm adding that stability, it's kind of like sorting itself out. Can also add beveling there a little bit. Could even, if this is for animation too, it's totally legit to add extra density. So it might be nice to not have it go all the way around, or all the way across. Maybe it's a little bit closer. Again, this is more of a preference thing. It doesn't matter too much. It's just sort of, what you kind of want to see in the look of your model. Main thing is watching for those tears. So that's another spot. I could definitely help this this is like going diagonal. So if we come back to another video where I was talking about the axes of your model and how you want to follow the secondary axis primarily. So, and the detail of the model informs what your secondary axis is. So this would be my secondary axis because these two anchor edges are flowing in this direction. And right now it's going diagonal to that. I don't really want to do that. I did that initially just to pin it, but you don't want to do that in your final because it won't work as nicely. Just have that run straight across and then just continue this one a little bit more and just checking it. So now it's a lot more stable. There's a little bit of a crease here, but that doesn't really bother me. If it did, I could do this and just pin it a little bit more. And then you can always like stabilize a little bit if that flatness or that edge was bothersome to you. That's always an option. And stuff like this, it's probably better just to have one running beside. It's a little more stable. And kind of continue that bevel all the way up. That'll also stabilize it. I'm using that word a lot, but how it be. Okay, so let's think about where this could run to. We could just put this underneath here, have this go down here, here, here. And it's fine to do stuff like this, where you're just sort of rerouting it back down, still following it. That's cool, that works. And I can get rid of the n-gons by doing that as well. And I have this here. Maybe I actually want to run this way instead. So you're always changing and adapting, kind of like looking at what you have in your surrounding models and just seeing if you can incorporate that into what you've added, you know? So in this case, for example, with this guy, is it more beneficial to run this way or is it more beneficial for it to go down? Both sides don't super matter, so I'm just going to run it in the way which could potentially benefit from having that support. And then just checking again. Again, we kind of have an issue of this at the corner being a little messy. So, actually, no, that kind of fixed it. Adding that extra loop stabilized it. So never mind, we're good. And yeah, not too much pulling. It's looking pretty good. Just got to add something nicer here because, again, sort of fighting that secondary axis. Don't want to do that. Want to complement the secondary axis whenever you can. Don't fight it because you'll have sad topos if you do. But yeah, that works pretty good. At this point, for example, you could apply the bevel modifier. I don't really think you need to. It's kind of nice to keep it live just in case you get edits or changes. Then you have that ability to like easily return to it. Depending on the studio you're at, some studios will be fine with tries in animation as long as it's a non-deforming piece. Some studios want no tries whatsoever. So if you're at a studio that's okay with tries, what I would suggest doing is just keeping this bevel and then also using triangulate, but then changing this to 5. So this is just going to clean up the bevel modifier for you. And then when you export this to whatever, probably Maya, because realistically your studio uses Maya as their main pipe, then it'll be triangulated and you won't have any n-gons. That's the important thing. But if you wanted to clear it without using this triangulate tool and say you did want it perfectly quadded and you don't want any tries, the other option, the final option for the most work, would be to use Meshlint. So this is a great add-on. It's free, very easy to find. If I remember, I'll include a link in the comments or something, but it's very easy to find. Just Blender, Meshlint, you know. And it works great. Tries, n-gons, non-manifold. This stuff's on by default. I don't really care about those. I really just care about n-gons and tries at the moment. So let's just start picking one corner and then just sort of working our way out. So let's go with this corner. The try here, I'm not going to worry about this one at the moment because that's pretty easy to fix after the fact. Like, you know what? Actually, I can just blend these two together. Never mind. So I'll take this one here, put this here instead. And actually this, I lied, sorry. This needs to go across. The easiest way to fix or to reinforce when you have, okay, let me just explain what I'm doing here. Okay, let me just rewind. Okay, so when you have a face like this and it's got three-sided, the best way to add it, loops to it so that it becomes quadded is to first cut across it and then add another loop here. So now it's quadded. And then you just have to figure out what you want to do with these extra loops that have been added. So I could just do this, for example, reroute it down. Keep in mind too that wherever, for example, you have non-manifold selected. I have 45 right now. It's an odd number, which means I need to add something else to that open edge in order to quad it. Again, I have a video on how to quad. That's definitely goes a little bit more in depth on this kind of stuff, but this is more specific to, you know, rocks, obviously. So I have already a cut like that going over this one. So I'll just add this here. And this is another scenario where you can just like reroute it down, checking. It's now even. So anytime I add one, I'm going to have to add two. So I can remove that now that I have this count. And I can start to bring n-gons and tries together. So add a loop, cutting this n-gon, adding to this try, removes it. Or like makes it be quadded, you know. And then I want to cut across here. I'm just pinning it for now in a random place. I don't really have a plan for where this is going to go yet because I'm really just focusing on like one spot at a time instead of trying to bounce around everywhere. So add this here. And then it might be easier if this is up because that gives me a little bit of room here to do this. I just have one more here, but I also have this try here. So if I just put this here across, then that's connecting it. That's an option. Having a shape like this right on an edge, not that clean, not super crazy about it, don't really like it. So instead of having the pattern run that way, I'll probably have this run straight across. And I'm going to have this go this way instead. I could just leave it there. That's not bad. I might just cut this across one more time. Again, turning this back on, making sure we're still even. Just being aware of like where you're at with that. And then we have this guy. So I'll undo what I did there. And I can either add down this way, or I can have this continue this way. There's already a decent amount of density over there. I don't really need it. I mean, there is this try here, so I guess I could add it to that. Doesn't hurt, I guess. You can always change your mind after. I frequently do. As I do these kinds of things, I'll set it one way and then get a little bit further and then realize there's actually a better place to connect to. I'm just going to be lazy and just do that. That's easy. Again, the edge of the model, we're not too concerned about that, but this is more just for concept. Okay, so we have this going on. We got this guy here. This is another good spot to cut across it. So now we're odd on the outer edge again. Just have to remember that we're odd. And honestly, could just do that. Doesn't hurt just to add that little thing. We could clip this if we want it, if we really wanted to. Doesn't really need it, especially since these are already flat. This is why, especially we go through that process of like flattening it ahead of time so that you can see where you're, because like even though I've added extra edges there, I'm not creating any extra lines because it's already flat and tested. So that's kind of the purpose of that. And then continuing on. Okay, so we've got these guys here. There's a few, the spot's a little messy. There's like quite a few going on here. I'm just gonna cut this across here. This is a pretty good shape. This is easy to quad when you have a shape like this. So I'm just gonna cut this across, cut this here. It's a little hard to explain. Again, you might need to watch the other video about patterns. I'm just using the same shapes and patterns over and over again based on the amount of edges that is going into the shape. And I've just done these so many times. It's pretty quick to do, but it definitely takes a lot of practice, that's for sure. So we got that. We got this try here. We got two of these right here. Might not be a bad idea to just cut straight across on both and then put this here instead. So now we've got, I don't need this anymore actually. I kind of did. Well, I might still need it. We'll see. You can always destroy what you did and add it back. It's fine. Now that we have that extra information of where that's going. Instead, that could go there maybe. Just pin this to the closest one. Now we're starting to get, it's getting a little heavy again. What might be good is to draw across here. We can benefit from this one. Put this together, get rid of that. Okay, continue checking. So that's been quadded. I actually do need that loop. I lied. I removed it for nothing. That's okay. And now we've got this kind of messy shape here. Not crazy about it. Don't love it that much. I think the easiest way to fix it though is to do this kind of thing and just have this probably go this way and then have this go here. And then I'll need to figure out where this goes. Can probably just connect it to this, honestly. That works. And once again, checking the other side because I forget. Okay, it's odd again, which is fine because I have an odd number to add here. It's sort of on its own. I don't really have an easy place to connect it to, so we'll just throw it to the edge. That's fine. And this is a spot where it's better to run the loops up than down, just because it's a little bit less awkward. So now we're odd again, which is fine, because I can add another one here. Now we're back to even. Get this, odd, and I'll probably add this one here, even. Okay, so we want to cut across this guy to quad it. Now you kind of want to decide which direction to cut from. I'll probably cut this way for now and add one here for now. I don't know exactly how far it'll go. Maybe something like this. And I'm going to add something else over here just to cut the length here because it's very, very long. Okay, do that. And a lot of the time too, when it's like a self-enclosed higher edge thing, I just sort of like run it along it. That's a really easy way to get rid of those tries. That one's kind of already cut. But okay, so we have these two guys here, both going to the same place. Pretty easy to just remove these and basically have it go around it instead. That totally works. So we got this guy here. This might be an odd number or the wrong number of things again. So actually, I don't want to make a pattern like that now that I think about it. Okay. Not terrible. Not terrible. It's just relax a little bit. It works. Okay. There we go. And just kind of cut this way. We got this guy, put that together, check again. Okay, so we're almost out of it here. One more here. I think that puts me back to odd, which is fine because I need a thing for this guy. Let's just check. It is, okay, now we're odd, so that's okay. So we have this one here. It's gonna be adding a lot of edges into this space just to quad it. Honestly, for this one, just because it's already flattened, we're just going to do this and have this go a little bit further instead, and we're just going to do that because it's not making a visual difference and it's just a little bit cleaner to go about it that way, so that works a little better. And we have these tries here, so we can add one here and here. And I'm going to see, I see where these are going. I kind of want to clip these together because they're making a ruckus. Just do this kind of thing, kind of just have them clip together. And then it's still quadded and we're good. And then normally I like to always pull back on these edges. In this case, it's a little messy to do that because it's right on the anchor edge. So I'm going to add one more loop here. Actually, I'll pin it on this side just for fun. Have this go just a little bit further so I can pull it back on not an anchor edge because that's bad. And let's see here. So we've got these guys. It might be best if this goes this way and this actually comes down. And this goes here. That gives us another try, but actually it's probably going to have to keep going because I can't end it in that spot. It's too close to the anchor edge. It won't do. It shan't do. Okay, so this one works fine. It's in the middle. It's not touching an anchor edge, so we can easily add another one there. Coming back here again, push that over. That created a bit of a shading interest or shading artifact, I guess. It made that spot dark. Sometimes what I'll do to fix that is just if you go to average face area, you'll notice how it turned kind of not weirdly dark in that corner anymore. It's just a visual thing. It doesn't really change anything. I like to do it just so it looks nicer, but you know. Okay, so our last tries and n-gons are all in this one little spot. We have an odd number of non-manifolds, so I have to throw one more edge to the outside. The easiest location to do that from is probably here, I'm thinking. And then just have this run a little bit further. So now this is the pulled back one. This is a little messy too. Maybe I want to go across instead. That's a bit less awkward. So yeah, getting that kind of a shading here, you can kind of, you can't really see it actually. It's not that apparent. Okay, so we can draw this one out. This is a beveled edge, but it's just a stabilizing edge, so it doesn't really matter if I pull it out. It's not really creating a visual difference, so that's fine. Bring those together, put this over here, just confirm again. Okay, so we have an n-gon which you can cut in half. That's pretty easy. And then we just have this one here. So there's one on this side, and there's one on this side. The easy way to deal with that is just to draw straight through, kind of like have these two edges self-enclosed take care of each other. That works pretty good. And we have another try here. So we've got a try on either side. The easiest way to fix that is just to draw it over instead and then do this kind of thing. And then I prefer to just grab these and smooth them a bit, just without pulling that one too far. Can even like collapse this a bit more and change the pattern a little bit and do this kind of thing instead. That also works. It is quadded, so that's what matters. So yeah, just checking with non-manifold. We don't have those. 66, that's good. No more tries or n-gons. From this point, you could, if this was for animation, even out the geometry a little bit. So you don't really need to per se, like just adding, just because, say for example, if this is the average face size, just adding a little bit more density to split those kinds of things up. Just giving it a little bit more space where it could potentially be needed, like cutting up this face, for example, would be good. Cutting up this one would be good. And at this point, it's like relatively easy. You're just sort of following the edges that you've already established. Another option is to use the loop tools, and you can go to, you could do relax or you could do space. It doesn't super matter, but if you go parallel all, let's just see what happens. If I do this a little bit, just kind of space that out a bit. It depends how big your rock is and how clean you want to go with it. You know, now that I've got that extra topology too, I can kind of remove this. I just sort of check that. So for example, I'm getting a bit of a pinch here. You just want to double check that the areas that are supposed to be flat are flat. That kind of fixed that one up. We got a funny thing happening here. Okay, so this is an area, for example, which was, oh, okay, that's probably my relax tool, my relax function probably messed that up actually, now that I think about it. That's okay. You just have to be careful when you use relax that you're not ruining your shapes, because this was actually not supposed to be an anchor edge. It's supposed to be like that, which is cool. Okay, so we have this going on now. It is reinforced. It is quadded. We have the bevel on here. I just want to point out though real quick that even though we've quadded it, you probably still want to have a triangulate on it afterwards, or optionally, you can apply your bevel and then just check again, because the bevel will also create n-gons. A lot of the time, it's just a matter of deleting an edge. It's like pretty easy to clean up. Like you can just do this kind of thing, this kind of thing. But if you don't want to go through that cleanup process, for example, just doing this kind of thing and then like removing, and then you say you remove all the bevel weight and you remove the sharp. That's why I was kind of giving it that weird hard edge look earlier, but it's just the sharp edges. So you could manually clean that up if you really wanted. or you can throw the triangulate on there. And then optionally, as a final step, if you wanted to, again, all of these are obviously all optional. You could go into sculpting now that the bevel is applied and just sort of like smooth out a few spots. Just be careful about how you're smoothing them, depending on what you're doing. If you're trying to get a little bit more variety in your rock or something, and you just want to get some edges kind of smoothed out, kind of, make some a little bit more organic-y, less straight. Kind of depends. I'm just holding shift and just like drawing basically um, at random. I'm not really trying to do anything in particular. I'm just making it more soft in some areas, but it just gives you that ability to kind of go between and just get, a slightly softer rock look if that's what you want. I'm partial to the stylized personally, so I don't tend to go for this kind of thing. It also can make your topology a little bit more messy, so you're probably going to want to go in after the fact and clean it up again anyway. Um, but yeah, that is how, those are the multiple different ways you can deal with trying to, finish up your model. And lastly, just real quick, I'll show in case you didn't want to use the bevel and you don't really like the way the bevel looks and you just want to do it manually. Plus, you can add more variety manually, like maybe you don't like how the bevel makes everything look the same. Optionally, if you wanted to do that, we'll reinforce a little section. I might not do the whole thing, but if you add an edge loop and you click E or F, you'll snap to the edge and you can just do the process manually. If you really wanted to, you could. I've done both. Both are good. You just have to make sure, if you're edge sliding and it's like getting messed up like this and it's like not sure what to do, that's because there's multiple different flows happening. It's typically if loops are going to like curve around each other, that's when it'll happen. Just deselect the stuff that you're working on to delete the other stuff and then slide it into place. The most important thing about when you are doing this type of reinforcing work is you're adding one loop on either side of every anchor edge, and this will ensure that you can always like quad your stuff very, very easily if you have one on either side. So for example, this arrow here, we have these two going out in either direction. Instead of just letting this run in like whatever direction, I'm going to cut this off. And I'm going to merge these together and then do this. So it's just the same patterns over and over again. As long as you have one holding edge on either side of the anchor edge, you can always quad it. It'll just change depending on your pattern. It doesn't matter if one edge is reinforced or if two or three. It doesn't matter how many there are, because as long as you're putting one on either side, it's always going to be an even number. And as long as it's always going to be even, you can always quad it. So do a few more corners here. So say for example, this one, it might be kind of hard to do the edge loop add thing. Just cutting and going straight across is also valid. You can also select and do the edge loop, add, E and F to get it closer to the edge after the fact. Not necessary, but you definitely can just to make it more precise if you want to. I mean, if you're going to be super precise anyway, you might as well do the automatic method, but you just do this, and then we have this corner. I definitely want to reinforce along here, so we put it up here as well. Put it in this direction, and then we're able to quad this corner as well. So doing it manually like this is going to be cleaner in the end, and then you'll get a lot more precise with your holds. So for example, when I'm smoothing this, it's a little bit sharper than the other result, so it kind of depends what you're going for. But those are a few different options for how you go about it. Just remember that even if you do have, if you've already beveled it and you want to go back, for example, and you want to like add, put creasing or something else on it, like maybe you want to use creasing, you can always go select similar, and then you can always go by bevel. You could go by sharpness. Just remember that you have those types of options for like quick selecting a lot of edges. So even if you're not using a bevel modifier, I like using stuff like this just to mark edges so they're easier to select later. Like even if that's all you're doing, that's still pretty handy. But yeah, that is how I would go about reinforcing rocks for either animation or games, depending on what you're doing. And if you like what I did, like and subscribe for more videos. Bye, folks.